the term gets thrown around a lot, but is it possible to define and explain an upmixer and what it does?
Yeah, and so I just wrote an article for Mobile Electronics Magazine that talks about this. Dave McKinnon, I think in the new issue, there's one where he talks about what an upmixer is. So an upmixer is a piece of software that turns two-channel audio, a two-channel recording, into more channels. That's what an upmixer does. The objective of upmixers can be different depending on what they do. Primarily, when I talk about an upmixer, what I'm talking about is stuff that's been around since probably, mid-late 80s. Upmixers started as a way for people who watch movies at home to be able to watch a movie in surround that they play back on a VHS tape. So the idea was to anchor vocals at the screen, no matter where you sit in the room, right? Sit on the couch, sit on the chair, whatever. When somebody's speaking, that sound ought to come from the center of the screen. The rear channels are there to improve believability or realism, right? If somebody's chasing you through the woods, if you're watching a movie where somebody's being chased through the woods by a big scary dude with an axe, it's helpful if the big scary dude with the axe is behind the person that you care about and that you don't want to see them killed. It's helpful in terms of realism for the dude with the axe to sound like he comes from behind you, right? And that's initially what an upmixer's rear channels were designed to do. These things were designed for movies. And they were used because customers are lazy when people listen to music because they just wouldn't get up and press the upmixer off button, right? So because upmixers for movies were designed so that the person who was mixing the soundtrack for the movie had a tool that he could use to put sound behind you. But when we listen to two-channel music, that hasn't been designed into the recording. So what happens in the back tends to be sort of catch as catch can. Sometimes it's great, and sometimes there's an error, and we hear stuff in the back that we shouldn't hear in the back because the recording wasn't designed to be played back over that particular upmixer. And this has been the reason that upmixers have not been adopted very well by the audiophile community because they've done stuff that they didn't expect, and frankly stuff that was wrong. But it was because it was designed for something different. So when we listen to a two-channel audio system in our living room, sometimes we play audiophile recordings. And one of the really coolest things that we can find to play back over a home audio system, which is a two-channel system set up in a living room, is a recording. And Mapleshade does this all the time. They'll bring like an acoustic group in and record them in their living room, right? So when we play that back over two speakers in our living room, which is a similar size, then guess what we do? We do a pretty good job of reproducing the room ambience because we're listening in a room to a recording made direct to track that was made in a similar room, right? So when we take that recording and we put it in our car, guess what we don't have? A similar room, right? So in many cases, those kinds of audiophile recordings are made in an environment so that they can be played back in a similar environment. So when we transfer that to an environment that's dissimilar, then we don't get the same experience.
I'm going to start recording music in a car. It's going to be a mobile studio. It's going to be a big van and everything.
There's an easier way. So, and sometimes I have this discussion with people who consider themselves to be audio purists, and they say, you're making this too difficult, right? If music is recorded in stereo, then it should be played back in stereo, and that's as good as we can do, right? And my response to that sometimes, and then they claim that that's a purist thing, right? That what they're getting off the CD is exactly what was put on the CD, and it was exactly what was intended to go on the CD. And I say, not always, right? Sometimes what we intend to put on a medium, the medium is insufficient to convey. Right? When I go to see a concert somewhere, I listen to musicians perform in a room. And one of the things that I like best about going to see concerts is the presentation of those musicians in that room. And a CD doesn't provide us an adequate way to reproduce the room. So DVD audio does, because they can set mics up around the room and they can put the room sounds in the rear speakers and in the side speakers. And that gives us an opportunity to replace or to put a reverberant field in a small car where a reverberant field can't develop because it's too small. So this is essentially similar to what the audiophile labels do when they make a recording in a room. This is designed to be played back in a room. What multi-channel DVD audio does is that it puts the room sound in the rear speakers, right? Similar exercise. the recognition is that you're going to play it back in a room that's dissimilar. So we need to give you some tools to add believability so that you can experience the room also. So that's discrete multi-channel for audio, but there aren't a lot of those recordings. An upmixer, so when people say that they're audio purists and that they reject any kind of additional processing because it isn't audio purism, my question sometimes is, do you ever use a bass control? And they say, well, yeah, I use a bass control because sometimes I like more bass. And I say, then you're not a purist, right? Do you use an EQ? Well, yeah, because I need to adjust the sound of the speaker so that it sounds like it's supposed to in my car. And I say, well, then you're not a purist. In the terms in which you're using the word purist to refer to some spatial equalization, which is what an upmixer is. The whole point of the upmixer is to extract from the recording some elements that allow us to use some tools that are designed to help us reproduce a sense of space and to help us, no matter where we sit in the car, hear a center image in the center. And that's what an upmixer is for. And it works on a 2-channel signal. Put some sounds in the side and the rear speakers that improve a sense of space or improve a sense of ambience, and it extracts the center signal and sends it to a center speaker so that the center image isn't reliant on a very precise match of the frequency response and the level between the left and the right speakers, which produces a phantom center image, right? So in traditional one-seat aftermarket systems, we say if the left and the right are matched perfectly in terms of frequency response and level, and if the sound arrives at the same time, then in one seat we hear a beautiful center image, and that's how it's supposed to be, right? And in an upmix system, we say, hey, there might be another passenger. How do we preserve the sound of that one-seat system and provide a similar experience in another seat? We can't do that with the current one-seat tools. We can't do that with delay. We can't do that. We can't do it with delays. So then the question is, okay, so if we can't do it with delays, is there another tool? And the other tool happens to be the ability to extract the center image that we try really hard in the 2-channel system. What if we extract that and send that to a speaker located in the center? Right now, the passenger hears the center image at the center speaker. The driver hears the center image at the center speaker, and so do the rear seat passengers. So now we're not relying on that tool, which is great for optimizing in one seat. We're deploying a different tool that allows us to optimize the same experience in 2 seats. Neither is necessarily better. They do different things. So the entire industry, especially in the aftermarket, has had a particular retort to this, and that is, if you optimize it for both, then it must be worse for one. And that's only the case if you consider the fact that if your only tools are EQ and delay, EQ level and delay. Yes, under those conditions, there has to be a compromise. But if we use a different tool, then we're not bound by that same constraint. So it is possible to make both seats sound great. And in fact, done correctly, it's easier to tune. Okay, I'll shut up now.
So you're optimizing the system for a center image in the middle of the car from both seats. And I get that, like, I get how that works. My question then is, the information that goes far left and far right, you're going to have an amplitude difference from one seat or the other. So how do you account for the far left and far right information being the same from both seats?
Well, okay, so it's not, and this is a difference. This is a difference between a one-seat car where in order to get a center image, we have to have the right speaker play at the same level when it arrives at our ears as the left speaker, right? So this is in fact not how live music works. Let's say you go to a little club and there's an acoustic group set up and they're not amplified, they're not being played back over a bunch of speakers, right? And let's say on the left is a guy playing the banjo. In the center, in the back, is a guy playing the drums. In the center, in the front, is somebody singing. And on the right is somebody playing a guitar.
So it's a mecca. Sorry.
Yes, it's a mecca. It's a mecca. Anyway, so if I sit in the middle, if I sit in the center of the venue, right in front of the person singing, and the guy playing the banjo and the guy playing the guitar play their instruments at the same level, then they're the same level. But if I sit to the left of center, what happens on the right stage is not as loud, right? What happens on the right side of the stage is not as loud if I sit left of center. And if I sit right of center, what happens on the right side of the stage is louder than what happens on the left side of the stage. So when we set up a one-seat system by making the left speaker and the right speaker play equal loudness, we're not reproducing what we would hear if we sat to the left of center in the venue. Right? But we have to do that in order to make the center image happen. So what we essentially do when we use delays is we move the center listening, the center seat in the venue to the left.
Okay,
right?
So your scenario is more
going to do that.
Yeah.
Right? So if we were gonna make the center, a seat to the left of center in the venue sound exactly like the seat in the center, we would turn up the level of the guy playing the guitar on the right. Okay, so in an upmix system, the original thing is preserved, right? What happens on the right side of the stage is not as loud in the driver's seat. And when I move to the passenger seat, what happens on the right side of the stage is going to be a little louder than it is in the driver's seat, right? So the experience is not exactly the same, but the experience done right can be more true to the original 2-channel recording than our one-seat 2-channel system.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I guess I have to take myself out of the perspective of expecting it to sound the same on the left and the right from both seating positions and present it more to myself as if, okay, I'm moving my physical seat in the venue where I'm listening to this music and I should expect things to be different on the left and the right.
Exactly. And the reason that we have to do that in the car is because somebody much richer than us with an American Express Black bought all the center seats.
Nice.
2 weeks before the tickets went on sale, right? So we don't get a center seat. We don't get a center seat in the car unless we can get the LEO guys to finally build that thing, or we take out the 2 seats and we put 1 seat in the middle, which I think is a fun exercise if our objective is to build the most perfect 2-channel audio system possible. Then moving the seat is one way to do that. But as I've been saying since the beginning of this call, my perspective is about building audio systems for customers who love music, right? So the idea that we're going to have a customer who loves music so much that he's going to allow us to turn his car into a 1-seat car that he can use every time he needs to go to 7-Eleven or go to the chiropractor is impractical, right? There will be 2 cars on Earth like that, and everybody else who loves music is going to be sort of stuck with only a 1-seat car. The other benefit of the whole upmixing thing is that it makes it much easier to tune. We have this bizarre idea that we're keep it simple, stupid, right? Keep it simple, stupid, and the simpler we can make something, the easier it is, and the less complicated it is, and all of that kind of stuff. If you do your own gardening at home, then if you think about it for like all of 30 seconds, that this perspective is crap. Right? One might use keep it simple, stupid to say that if you're going to have a beautiful lawn or if you're going to do your own gardening, the fewer tools that you have, the better off you're going to be, right? But a lawnmower is insufficient for trimming the hedges, right?
Yeah.
And even these days, there's probably a sticker on your lawnmower that says this device should not be used to trim hedges because some moron thought that he should like turn his lawnmower up sideways and try to trim all of his hedges with it and like cut his arm off and whatever. So now there's a warning. But so what makes things simple is having the right tool for the job. So the objective of audio systems, whether they're 2-channel or upmix systems, are the same. And that objective really, and there are some variants, but that objective really is to have a stable center image, because that's what a stereo recording is designed to do. A stable center image with a distinct left stage and a distinct right stage, and instruments and vocals laid out in between the left and the right as they're put on the CD. And that we should also, if it's included in the recording, and it's not always included in the recording, we should also experience some sense of a recording space that the person who's mastered the recording has included, right? Sometimes that's a real space. Sometimes that's a space that's synthesized or made or whatever. But those are the objectives. And upmixers done properly can help us achieve that objective in some ways better and in some ways more easily. So upmixing doesn't require delays. You don't have to set up left delay and right delay. That's a tool for a one-seat system. It doesn't work in a two-seat system. So we don't have to do that. So what we do need to do is do a pretty good job of equalizing left, center, and right so that they're basically the same. Because in an upmix system, what happens between the center and the right and between the center and the left is that for an upmix system, that's the phantom image, right? Make sense? If it happens between, so if we want an image that's left of center, then that's going to be generated by the summed output of the center speaker and the right speaker. Well, it just so happens that once we put the center speaker in there, the path lengths between the center and the right and the path length between the center and the left is much more similar, right? So that makes our phase problem at higher frequencies where we don't hear it as easily. Tuning the image in an upmix system is simply a matter of adjusting the levels. If the center image is not in the center, then we turn the center channel up. And if the left of center image is not far enough left, then we turn the left speaker up. And if the right of center image is not far enough right, then we turn the right speaker up. And that's it. And it can be really simple.
Gotcha. I think we need to look at wrapping this back around to a competition scenario where we have a two-seat category or a class where you're being judged from both seats. I think today a system like that probably isn't going to check all the boxes for the score sheet from both seats, because it's basically one judge sits down with the score sheet and the driver's seat has the same score sheet in the passenger seat, and they're basically doing their own judging and then summing the scores. So I think we maybe need to look at, or the powers that be who, create these score sheets and the scoring systems need to evaluate the objective of a two-seat vehicle. Is it, trying to make it exactly the same all across the stage from both seats, or is it trying to, like you're suggesting, make it as if you're sitting in different seats in the auditorium and resembling what you might hear in those different seats?
I think it might be an unnecessary distinction. So if you had a track, maybe it's the old Iasca 7 drum beats track where the drum beats move across the dash, or on this with this microphone kit that I'm selling, there's a tuning CD, and I'm going to make that available separately here in a couple of weeks. I've developed some musical tracks that do left, center, right, and right. I think are a little easier to use. But so if we're talking about an imaging score, and the idea is that both the driver and the passenger should hear the left of center image, left of center, then no change is necessary, because they're both going to hear left of center, left of center. They're both going to hear center in the center. They're both going to hear right as right. But what will happen, and I don't think that there's anything in the score sheet that even addresses this, is that let's say that the far right drum beat is going to sound louder for the passenger than it does for the driver, but it's still going to be far right. So it might make sense. It might make sense to go through the rules and say, hey, so if we're going to do a two-seat category, what can we add? What kind of evaluations can we add that gives the opportunity for a two-seat car to score better?
Right.
If the objective is to figure out which two-seat car sounds the best, then what are the objective and subjective measures that would allow us to say, yes, this two-seat car sounds better than that two-seat car? And it could be that the one-seat judging format or the one-seat rules don't allow for something that a two-seat car does really well to get a score, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
So to me, it makes sense to have to revisit the rules in the score sheet to be sure that what we're doing, if we're going to have a competition that's focused on two-seat performance, is that we ought to understand two-seat performance, and we ought to make some rules that give people who are inclined to build two-seat systems and want to build the best one possible something to shoot for.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of the people competing in those categories today actually have, what we would deem a one-seat vehicle set up for, optimized for the driver's seat, but they then just go ahead and compete from the other seat and have it scored from that seat also, and kind of ride on the tonality of the system versus imaging.
Right. And that exercise is how good is it in the driver's seat and how much does it not suck in the passenger seat?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's exactly a method of how many compromises have gone through, and the better cars do very well in the driver's seat and have fewer compromises in the passenger seat. The one car I would say is not like that would be Nathan Budiono's. His is pretty stellar from both sides because I think he's using a lot of the techniques you're talking about already. His doesn't sound as good as some others from the driver's seat, but like what you're talking about, it has very good technical proficiency from both seats. And like you said, center's where center should be, and left of center is where left of center should be, whether you're in the driver's seat or the passenger seat.
Right. And I have a pretty good idea of what Natan is doing, which is Natan, as I understand, is not using an Upmixer. He's using some other stuff, and it's not my place to.
I think he designed his own stuff, as far as I know.
Well, yeah. So he's working at Harman now, so he's got access to some same stuff that I had access to when I was there. And I'm not going to divulge Natan's tricks, but it is possible. I have a pretty good idea of what he's doing, and it is possible with those tools to do exactly what he's doing, right? Which is to make it symmetrical from the left and the right in a system that is more similar to a 2-channel system than a system with an Upmixer. But yeah, I think that we ought to consider for a 2-seat. So ideally, I think certainly one of the reasons for competition is to figure out whose system is the best, right? The other objective of competition ought to be to raise the level of what is best to reflect what we think we can do in the future, right? So we have something to shoot for. And I think that some kind of a 2-seat competition ought to include some qualifications where, given today's technology, the best possible score is a 3, right? Because maybe if we recognize that the panacea is a space that sounds larger than the car and performance, an experience that's the same in the 2 front seats and hopefully in the 2 back seats as well. If we can't do that today, then nobody gets a 10, right? The score sheet should not reflect the best we could do 10 years ago. The score sheet and the objective should reflect the best that we think we'll be able to do in 10 years so that we have something to work for.
I agree. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I think that could be simply because what we're dealing with in the aftermarket as an industry are OEM systems that do stuff that we cannot do. Consumers who have something in their car already that we cannot do, right? So what we often do these days is to say, that stuff that we cannot do is voodoo and it's crap and it's stupid and we don't like it because it isn't perfect, right? Everything is iterative, right? These guys are getting better. We're getting better. Hopefully, in the interest of pleasing customers, we can figure out how to keep what is cool and improve on it because that's what we've always done. So I think 2-seat competition would be great because it would give installers and retailers and retail sales guys and enthusiasts a venue for improving our ability to create systems that our customers like, which is what competition has been for many of us who've been retailers for years and years and years. It's a way for an installer to showcase his best work and to get a trophy for it. I don't think that competition needs me to do 1-seat cars. We know how to do 1-seat cars. There are 1-seat car experts, and I have no problem. I have no problem with 1-seat cars, in terms of competition or as a way to satisfy a customer who, in fact, is interested in a 1-seat car. That's an apple. I don't need to be involved in qualifying apples. There are lots of Apple experts. But a 2-seat car is kind of a banana, right? And I'm not sure that what we do to characterize an apple necessarily applies to a banana. And I might be the guy to help write some rules that would characterize the banana. So I'd love to be involved in putting together some kind of competition rules that would help to characterize a 2-channel or a 2-seat car. So yeah, I'd love to contribute to that, because I have some experience and some expertise that would probably be helpful.
To circle back a little bit, we've talked briefly about Audiofrog's been brought up a couple times, and obviously we spent a lot of time on your job at Harman, but I guess the part that is a gap for me is what was your, and not to say anything negative about Harman or anything. They're a great corporation, as I think we've both said, but why would you leave there with what sounds like a great job around great people doing cool stuff with big budgets to go into playing in the boutique car audio world yourself? I mean, I know it's like we were talking about, they're both apples, but it's kind of very much apple banana, because it seems like it's two very different ways to approach the market.
Well, yeah, it is, and that's precisely the reason that I left. And it's exactly the same as 1-seat versus 2-seat in competition. When I started Harman, the objective was to make premium gear and whatever else, and to sell that in a market, and target consumers who were interested in premium gear and whatever else. And towards the end of the time that I was at Harman, the perspective for the category and the expectations from the corporation for what the category should deliver and how it should deliver that were very different, right? Essentially, they wanted to focus on less high-end stuff. Was less high-end in the interest of sell it to more consumers at lower prices. And there are a lot of people who can develop those kinds of products. And it was basically, my job was turned into a job in which I couldn't, where I would have to work outside of my gifts. There wasn't really much of an opportunity for me to teach, and there wasn't an opportunity for me to develop any more what I consider to be really solutions-based products. And there was a focus on the needed products that were sort of more mainstream. And I felt like there was a unique opportunity for me and a group of other people to at the time, at the end of the financial problem, and between, I guess, 2007 and maybe 10 or 11, all the growth everywhere in the whole world was in emerging markets, right? And that's fine, and a focus on emerging markets is great. But products that you design for emerging markets are often not the highest end, most expensive stuff, right? Because an impulse buy, a $99 Bluetooth speaker is an impulse buy in the US, but a $99 Bluetooth speaker is not an impulse buy in a country where somebody who is middle class, a middle class family of 4, can finally afford a scooter, right? It's a completely different market. So I wanted to do Audiofrog because I believed, and I still do, that as the industry and as the market changes back into an enthusiast market for car audio, right? So there was a period when I started in car audio, it was only little specialty stores. Circuit City hadn't figured out that it was an actual business yet. Best Buy didn't even exist. So it was a market where we sold and installed audio gear for people who loved music and who loved cars. And in order to even consider a purchase, one would have to be an enthusiast. And then the industry turned into those same enthusiasts and those same retailers, but it sort of caught on, and products became commodities, and we had Circuit City and Best Buy, and we had $49 speakers and $69 speakers and $99 amplifiers, but that business it's not gone, but that business has moved to online, and mostly the business of commoditized, inexpensive products is now done by the car maker. Right? Buy a new Toyota Corolla, and what you'll get is a radio that's similar to what we would have probably put in the car, 3 or 4 years ago. It's a touch screen, and it's got a bunch of apps, and you can connect your phone to it and whatever else. And that used to be something you had to buy in the aftermarket. The front speakers will be an inexpensive component system, right? It's an inexpensive 6-inch and a tweeter, and there's probably a cap in there, and then there's some speakers in the back. And some of those systems might include a very basic small subwoofer that's amplified, right? That's the business that we used to do 20 years ago. And now the car maker is doing it, right? So I think that the business in aftermarket is turning back into an enthusiast business. It's the same people that have been buying car audio for 30 years, people who love music and love their cars. I can be useful. I can be useful in a company that is focused on delivering solutions for that kind of customer, but I'm not all that useful in a business that's focused on trying to extract the last of what's available in the commoditized market. So that's why audio.
That makes sense. So where did the name Audiofrog come from? How'd you come up with that?
Well, so I used to sit through a lot of marketing meetings, and what I would always hear is the car audio demographic is boys between 16 and 24. And I always thought, no. I mean, for the 30 years that I've been doing this, I can count the number of systems that I've sold to that demographic, premium systems, right? Great sounding stuff, upscale stuff, has never been, boys between 16 and 24. That's the $69 speakers, and I need a pair of 12s, and I got a buddy who's going to build me a box out of chipboard in his backyard under an right, whatever. I mean, it's a different customer. So my experience has been that premium car audio buyers, customers, are they're guys between 35 and 70, and a lot of them, so they're adults, right? They're adults. They're adults with some money to spend, which means that they've probably either inherited a bunch of money or they have a job. That job might be a professional job, or it might not be. It could be a guy who's a tradesman, a plumber, an electrician, or whatever else. But in a lot of cases, those customers have a significant other, and that significant other is not necessarily drawn to ultra macho brands, right? And the purchase for discretionary income for premium audio systems, somebody who's going to spend $7,000 or $8,000 on an audio system doesn't just have $7,000 or $8,000 to spend. He and his wife have $20,000 to spend. And the negotiation is about how much of that 20 grand is going to go in the car and how much of that 20 grand is going to go for a cruise or a kitchen remodel or God knows what else, right? So it's a negotiation between a guy and his wife and Audiofrog. If the negotiation is between Audiofrog and some other much more macho brand, bloody murder, death, Black Death audio, then I win. Audiofrog wins because the wife is on board. Right? It's almost like, yeah, if you buy that one, I like that one. So if you buy that one, you can have an extra couple of grand, right? So that was one of the reasons for it. I wanted something that was friendly, and something that wasn't off-putting for significant others, something memorable. Building a brand, one of the most important things about building a brand is making sure that people can remember your brand name. So the real objectives were friendly, contemporary, easy to remember, and a little self-effacing. Because if we had called it, let's say we called it Perfect Speakers,
Audio God.
right? Audio God could never find a better speaker ever on the face of the earth because ours are perfect.com, right? And I hand you a speaker. What's your perspective going to be?
What's wrong with it?
Exactly, right? But Audiofrog's a little confusing and it's kind of absurd and whatever. And the logo suggests high end, but it doesn't suggest high end in a really exclusive kind of a way like so many audio brands do. So it leaves that open, right? The expectation, it's much harder to formulate an expectation for what an Audiofrog speaker would be because nobody's told you with the brand name that these things are going to be beautiful and high end or so expensive that only a few people can afford them, or they're going to be low end so that everybody can get them. So if you have no experience with the brand and you pick up an Audiofrog speaker, then the perspective is not what's wrong with it. The perspective is sort of more innocent, right? I have no idea what it is. And then you pick up the speaker and you go, oh my God, this thing is beautiful. Or, wow, these things sound great, right? It sort of allows people to discover the products rather than suggesting to them what the product is. And we were considering a whole bunch of different names and a whole bunch of different logos. And at the time that we were putting the company together, I was doing a lot of traveling everywhere, overseas and in the U.S. So I put a whole bunch of these brand names on T-shirts and I wore them everywhere. And literally, all of the other things that we were considering, nobody ever asked me about. Ever. Nobody asked, right? Nobody. Not anybody. And when I would wear my Audiofrog T-shirt, people would ask. I'm at the bookstore and there's a guy, my age, and I mean, I'm target demographic. There's a guy my age and his son, and they're looking at books, and I walk by, and the dad looks at my shirt and then does a double take, right? So they're standing there. Now I'm in the checkout lane, and the guy comes over and he goes, "Hey, what's Audiofrog?" I'm like, and I'm sitting there going, "No way, man. Could it be?" I go to I go to check into a hotel in Hong Kong somewhere, and I'm wearing my Audiofrog T-shirt, and the one behind the counter smiles and says, "Hey, what's Audiofrog?" I go to the bank, I bank at Chase, and I've been to the branch here, I don't know, 100 times. And the person who greets you at the bank never remembered me. 100 times I've gone in. And this person has never remembered me, ever, ever, ever. I get the stock greeting. I walk into my Audiofrog shirt, and she says, "Wow, what's Audiofrog? That's pretty." What's your name? And I'm like, well, my name is John Customer, and I've been here like 500 times, but my real name is Andy. Now, every time I go to the bank, guess who I am? I'm Andy the Audiofrog guy. So comparing that to or asked or remembered or anything, then the decision was pretty clear. And there were lots of arguments and fights between some of my partners about whether it was sufficiently masculine, right? And I had a bunch of guys who, especially on DIY, on the DIY forum, who were sort of eagerly awaiting the launch of this thing after they found out that we were going to do something. And when I launched the name, I got a lot of PMs saying, "Man, that's the stupidest thing I'll never put that in my truck." And my response was, "Okay, maybe." So I get it. You hate the name. You hate the name. You hate the feel of the name because it isn't what you're used to. And maybe the logo doesn't look right on your, Chevy 3500 with 60-inch Mickey Thompsons. Maybe I can convince you to overlook the brand name once you see the products. And if not, if I give up that guy in order to better appeal to a demographic that I believe is the right one for the brand, then so be it, right? And a lot of those, and some of those guys came around, and some of them didn't. I think that we've done a pretty good job of building the brand name and building brand recognition in a sort of a niche industry where it's enthusiasts and whatever in a short period of time. So I'm really happy about that, and I think that it was the right decision. I certainly like the name and the logo better than a bunch of the other stuff that we were considering.
You should have called it TLDR Audio.
Yes, exactly. Too long, didn't read.
Anyway, okay, so before we wrap up, what would be, I got two fairly quick questions, I think. If you could go back to your 18 to 25-year-old self, or to somebody who is starting into car audio now, whether they be in the industry or competing or an enthusiast or whatever, what would be the one piece of advice you would give that person who is just kind of coming in and getting their feet wet?
Well, I guess it would depend on what they wanted to make of a career in car audio. My suggestion,
even not a career, if they just from an enthusiast level getting into it.
Oh, from an enthusiast level, man, it's been so long since I characterized myself as just an enthusiast.
Well, it's taking what you know now and giving it to somebody like that.
So I would say if you're a music lover and you're thinking about getting into car audio as a hobby, or you're thinking about buying a system, the main thing I think to recognize or to begin to recognize is that the choice of gear is really important. You want to buy good gear, and you want to make those decisions based on I think whatever it is whatever the objective is for your system, but included in the choice of the right gear is the right choice of somebody to install it. And that doesn't mean that you need to go to the world's best fabricator in order to get something installed that you're going to appreciate. It means that you need to go to somebody who can, in fact, deliver a great sounding system. It can be really hard to determine which shop in your neighborhood is the right one, right? But I think that one solid piece of advice is that the guy gives you the lowest quote on labor is not the guy who is going to deliver you the best. And the installation is not a matter of hooking stuff up. The installation is not a matter of hooking stuff up. It's a matter of designing a system using the components that you're going to choose together, right? And the guy who's going to implement the system, the guy who's going to install it, the guy who's going to design the system is going to suggest to you tools that he can use effectively, right? So while it's fine to be a fanboy and it's fine to decide that the brand you love is the right stuff, know that the guy that you talk to who's going to design the system for you may have other suggestions, and that expertise, once you find it, that expertise is in fact what you're paying for when you pay to have something installed. So don't shop for installation on price, and recognize that those kinds of crazy installations where it's a huge trunk build and whatever else, that takes a lot of skill. And you should expect to pay for that skill, and to carefully think about what your budget will allow you to get and what you in fact require, right? Because if your budget will allow for a trunk build, if you use $99 amps and $49 speakers, then recognize that what you're going to get is a beautiful system that doesn't sound very good. And if what your objective really is a system that sounds great, then be prepared to spend more on the gear and to forego some of that custom installation that doesn't in fact contribute to better sound. But a great sounding system is not $40. It's not $40, and it doesn't only depend on the choice of gear. It depends on the choice of an installer. Just like a kitchen remodel depends on the right craftsmanship. Right? $60,000 worth of beautiful cabinets installed poorly is not going to make a nice kitchen. Skimping on what you want to pay in labor is a bad way to get a great system. And the other thing to recognize is that when you find that installer, when you find that guy who can put together a great system for you, recognize that it's his job, and he's chosen to do this job because he's talented and he loves it and he's interested in it, but that the reason that he does this job is to put his kids through school and so he can eat and have and buy shoes and stuff. And when you go and you talk to him about the system that you want and about the products that he's going to sell you, recognize that in order for him to stay in business and to continue providing the great service that you're expected to get from him, he needs to make some money, just like you need to make some money in whatever job that you do. So when you talk to him for 2 hours and he suggests amplifier A and speakers B and head unit C and DSP D, that when you leave and go do your Amazon search or your eBay search or whatever, so that you can save $50 on a pair of $1,000 speakers and $40 on an $800 DSP, and you can buy those amps used from somebody for half the price. So you buy all this stuff and you go back to the installer and you say, "Hey, cool, I was in here a couple of weeks talking to you about this system. I have all the stuff." That he is not going to be motivated to do a great job for you, because in order for him to have an installation bay and installers who do great work, he needs to make some money on the sale of the products, right? So searching for a deal, saving $10 on the DSP by ordering it from some Amazon seller or from somebody on eBay does you harm with the guy that you're going to spend a bunch of money on to implement the system. It's no different than calling a contractor to remodel your kitchen and having him come over and write you an estimate for what he's going to need and how much is the drywall going to be and how much is the plumbing going to be and how much is this going to be in the cabinets and whatever else and blah 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 blah. So he makes a living by it because he gets a little piece of the sale of all of those products, right? So you agree, you sign the contract and he's going to do this beautiful kitchen for you. So he shows up with his crew and you direct him to the backyard and you say, "Oh, here's all the stuff. I have a buddy that works at Home Depot. So these aren't exactly the cabinets that you recommended, but they're pretty close." Right? And there's a bunch of 2x4s back there. Some of them aren't straight, but use them anyway. The contractor's going to go, "Fuck you." And he's not going to do a great job.
And that makes a lot of sense because, there's plenty of people that tend to do that. I think a lot of people, including myself, have been guilty of doing something like that to somebody at some point without thinking about it. But they're professionals and they're there to do a job. And if you bypass them or force them into doing something using a product that they're unfamiliar with, then they're going to also give subpar results just because that's not what they work with every day.
That, and because they're people. They're people. When you buy something from somebody, when you buy a service from somebody, when you buy a car audio system, you're not buying a service or a collection of products. You're buying a product that guy is going to develop for you. That includes labor, that includes materials, that includes vision and expertise, and it includes the products that you're going to buy. And people who do this work for a living love to do it, right? So why would you, and I don't think people do this consciously, they're just looking for a deal, right? But what they don't realize is that they're asking a person to do something great, right? And then they chip away at the motivation for doing something great by saving a few bucks here and there. And what they don't realize is that it's a complete false, it's false economy. Right? They feel great because they saved $80, and now they've got a guy who is no longer motivated to do a great job because he's trying to stay in business. And now, in order to stay in business, he's got to get your job in and out, right?
Yep. No, I agree. Yep. The last question, and this should be an easy one, I think. But when you get a system together, or first anything, if you want to sit down and listen to something really great, what's the first piece of music that you've gone to over the years that is one of your main references?
We always say that's so easy, and then everybody struggles. I can't understand it.
Well, because there's not just
Oh,
one.
I'm totally with you.
There's not just one, but probably the piece of music, and I don't always stick this one in first. Probably the piece of music that I've used. I can't even say that there's one. If I had to choose only one, and this was the one that I was going to use to evaluate audio systems, whatever, it would be Lonely Avenue, which is a Van Morrison track from an album called Too Long in Exile. And I choose that one because the recording is excellent. It's there's the crest factor is super high. The imaging is great, and I'm sort of connected in an emotional way for whatever reason. I mean, I like that song, right? So it's easy for me to put that song in and determine, whether the frequency response is right. And I can tolerate a lot of frequency response errors so long as spatial attributes are good, right? A peak somewhere or a dip somewhere else is not as big an error for me as no center image, right? If there's no center image, I don't even want to listen to it. Right? For me, I can't even evaluate the tonal quality of a system that doesn't have some kind of an image, because it's just not. It's like a banana split with no ice cream. I'm sorry, it's not a banana split. But yeah, that's a track that sounds great, and when I hear it, I'm inclined to listen carefully.
Well, I think we will wrap it there, but I certainly appreciate it. I think this will be very enjoyable for a lot of people who want to hear.
It'll be long. It'll be really long It'll be
I think it's gonna be like 2 hours.
Yeah, well, we're
close to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll be good.
TLDR in audio format.
Yeah, I think it's